Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Sorry we're 2 minutes late here. Boker Tov, good to see everyone. We're going to get started as soon as everyone's in the room, which I think everyone is in the room. Mark, do you feel like saying the bracha over Torah study this morning? Mark Horn. Wait, you're going to be unmuted in a second.
If I remembered correctly, I'll give it a try.
Well, it's the standard formula, and la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen. Amen. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. We have another really juicy parsha this morning. Korach, about the rebel. Some would say the holy rebel, and others would emphatically say the unholy rebel. So what we're going to do today is a little bit different. You can see I'm experimenting with different formats and styles and just see what works. And I always welcome your feedback. If you feel like, oh, this really worked today, or oh, this really didn't work today, just don't be too mean about it. But I do welcome feedback, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at some Korach, enough material so that you get a sense of what's going on, what the conflict is about. And then I'm going to invite you to sort of join the fray and speak either in the voice of Korach or Moshe. Korach and Moshe, what are the two sides here and what's going on? So it's a little bit of, a touch of bibliodrama. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be different. We'll see how it works. And as always, I'm going to invite you to be as concise as possible so we can get as many voices in the room as we can. And my last point is that we need to end, unfortunately, early at 9:50 so we can get things started, our live services started across the street and work out whatever technology we need to work out, which I don't totally understand, but I just know we need to end by 9:50. So if you can assist me with that and just, let's keep things on track as much as possible and moving. Okay, with all that, I'm going to screen share. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Aha. Nope, didn't work. I might need help screen sharing. Let's see. This should be it. Again, no. All right, Michaela or Ari, if we can, wait, people are already raising their hands. Okay, before I even introduce the Parsha fully, okay, Asher Chaim, what do you want to say? Oh, you have this, you want the link. Is that what you're saying? This is charades. This is not it. Okay. Michaela, can you drop the link into the chat? That would be great. Or Ari, the link for the source sheet into the chat. And then if one of you can actually share the source sheet, that would be great, since I'm having glitches. You need the link. Okay, I thought I gave it to you before, but I'll find it. Hold on a second. Sorry, everybody. Let me start as I figure this out. Let me just start talking a little bit about the Parsha. So let me bring you back to last week's Parsha, which was Shlach Lecha. And if you recall, it was this story about the 12 spies, and 2 of them were very excited about going to the promised land, and 10 of them were not. And 10 of them said, we cannot, there is no way we can conquer this land. This is not going to happen. And God's plan is basically not going to work. And it's too bad we didn't die in Egypt or in the wilderness. Okay, so I found the source sheet. I'm going to give you the link. And now actually, I think I can screen share myself. Hold on. Everyone in meeting. Okay, there you go. I'm going to try to share my screen one more time and continue. Here we go. Oh, no. All right, actually, I'm going to need help. I found it. Here we go. Does everyone see it?
Yes, you will. Yes, now it's good.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so, and the terrible punishment for the spies was that they would not be able to go into the promised land. And it was kind of a midah keneged midah, measure for measure, because the land that they rejected, they would not be able to go into. And in fact, the Torah uses just that language, like God says, well, they rejected it and they can't go in. And so they were destined to wander around the wilderness for 40 years, the same number of days that their reconnaissance mission was. And, you know, they would just be left behind as corpses in the desert. And again, I'm sort of capturing the language of the Parsha. And Yehoshua and Caleb, or the two spies who said, yes, we can, would be the only people to go into the promised land. So it really has like a tragic feel. And last week's Parsha ended with this passage, and I bring it in because it will become important in the rabbi's reading of Korach. And maybe actually not only in the rabbi's reading, but literarily it's interesting because it's the Parsha immediately, it's the piece, when I say Parsha, it's the piece of text immediately before Korach. So we'll see how everything connects. Okay, so I'm going to read it in English, and then I will ask Asher Chaim to read it in Hebrew. Speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves fringes. And of course, this is part of our daily Shema reading. On the corners of their garments throughout the ages, let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe at each corner. So I'm just showing you my talit for a second. And I actually have a blue fringe on my talit. That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and eyes in your lustful urge. And that language in the Hebrew, velo taturu, do not follow, recalls the language for spying the promised land, which was latur et haaretz. So there's some connection between this passage and that narrative. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. So that's interesting, that command to, well, the observing and then the invitation to be holy. And then this passage ends, as so many passages of instruction do. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, your God. So now we know emphatically who God is, and somehow that connects to this instruction for wearing tzitzit. Okay, Asher Chaim, take it away.
דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת. והיה לכם לציצית וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. I'm sorry. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Thank you. Okay, so a few more things about this passage, which is this verse here, right? So that you do not follow your heart and your eyes, right? That you are, you know, zonah is a prostitute, that you're sort of prostituting after them, your heart and your eyes. But I think it's a really interesting description of what tzitzit is all about, because it's the opposite. It's entirely countercultural. We always say, follow your heart, believe your eyes, follow your heart, you know, what's in your heart. But here it's like, don't follow your heart. It's so interesting. And what does that mean, right? And it seems to me that what this is pointing to is that if you're not remembering God's project, or if you're not remembering the bigger project that you're part of, and your mission, your goals, your purpose, and just the sort of overall sacred trajectory of your life, and that you're part of something larger, then you get into big trouble, right? Why? Because we're all, when we're left to our own devices, we can go to very, very narrow places. So the tzitzit is to remember that we're part of this bigger enterprise, and it gives each of us, right, it reminds each of us that each of us has the possibility of being holy to our gods, right, to our God. And then finally, remembering that God is the one who took us out of Egypt to be a God for us. So there's a direct access thing and the potential of holiness, right, for each person in the nation, the people of Israel. Okay. Beth, do you want to say something quick? I see your hands up. Okay. Directly on point here?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Your heart and your eyes, it's all plural. And so while we have the modern idiom of following your heart, following your whatever, that's for us personally. This is for us as a group. This is everybody. And so I think in a way it's warning against a mob mentality.
Interesting. So, and the mob mentality represented by the 10 spies. Possibly. Okay, let's go on. So that's interesting. But in any case, whether it's individually or collectively, if you don't remember the larger sacred project that you're part of, there's trouble ahead. Okay, Jay, quick comment.
I had a question.
Yeah.
A share.
Yeah.
A Tim. What does that word really mean? Because my question is, here it's translated so that. So the reason being, is there a sort of an automatic relationship between your heart and your eyes and whoring, or is it on those situations where your heart and your eyes cause you to whore?
There's no so that. I would say that you prostitute after them, and it seems to me to be an assumption that we do somehow whore after our eyes and heart.
So it is almost a natural consequence as opposed to a specific instance.
Correct. That's how I'm reading it.
Thank you.
Okay, Asher Chaim, yes.
Just to throw a little spanner in the works, Lave anatomically is the heart, but was often viewed as the place where you do your thinking. Cognate in Arabic, lub, is intellect. And I think Maimonides does a lot about hearts and minds.
Yeah.
So the danger is not just feeling, but intellectualizing and rationalizing and taking a good idea, rationalizing and turning it into idolatry.
Nice. So I know that many scholars read lave as mind in the Torah. From my own study, I feel like it's that integration of heart and mind, like that place where we do our sort of, feeling, thinking, and like you said, like we often use our minds to kind of rationalize what our hearts want to do, right? That's when the heart goes in the wrong direction. Okay, so now let's go to Korach. Here we are. So it starts in such a fascinating way that, Rabbi David talked a little bit about this last night. Now, Korach, son of Itzhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi. Now, the English says betook himself, but the Hebrew is not reflexive. So the English translation here, and most translations do, is already solving a textual problem. Let's talk about the textual problem itself before we solve it, right? So to sort of open more interpretive possibilities. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi v'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Eliab v'On ben Pelet b'nei Reuven. So this whole line of names, starting with now Korach took. Now the truth is, there's no object for the verb took. So Korach took. What did he take? Right. So I often feel like, What he took was nothing. What he took was taking. Korach took because he wanted to take, right? There's this, like, what can I take? What can I take? What can I take? Even though there's no specific object for the taking. That's how I'm reading this, at least. And let's also notice like what's going on here genealogically that might help us to understand what's happening in the narrative at large. So Korach is a son of Itzhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi. Now, Kohat was the father of Amram, correct? I'm looking at Asher Chaim's head to see. Yeah, I think that's right. Kohat was the father of Amram. Amram was the father of Moshe, but Amram also had 3 brothers at least. And Korach is the son of the second born to Kohat. So it's Amram, then it's Har. So Korach is basically Moshe's cousin. And there seems to be some jealousy here. And then interestingly enough, Datan and Aviram, and On and sons of Pelet are descendants of Reuven. And if you remember, Reuven is the firstborn to Jacob, right? So there's definitely something going on here in terms of who's firstborn, who's secondborn, who has a right to what, and they're all rising up against Moshe. ויקומו לפני משה ואנשים מבני ישראל 50 נשיאי עדה, so 250 chieftains. So again, it's like the important, people with power, but I guess not sufficient power, in the people in the people sort of encamped in the Israel in the wilderness. Kri'ei moed anshe Shem. So chosen in the assembly, men of repute. And if you remember, the 10 spies were also men of repute. It wasn't exactly this language that was used, but they were, also just people who were like respected and had power and had positions of leadership. So it's not the people who have nothing that are staging a rebellion now. Okay, so let's see what happens. So I'll read the English and then I'm going to invite Asher Chaim again to read the Hebrew. We're in verse 3. So they combined, or they gathered against Moshe and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, Rav Lachem." Why? For all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. So if everybody's holy, why do you have these positions? Like, what's going on? We're holy too. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation? When Moshe heard this, he fell on his face. Okay, Asher Chaim.
ויקהלו על משה ועל אהרון ויאמרו עליהם רב לכם כי כל העדה כולם קדושים ובתוכם אדוני ומדוע תתנשאו על קהל אדוני וישמע משה ויפול על פניו.
Okay, so now what I want you to do is to sort of gather information for each side of things. So here for Korach and the people with him, the claim is Rav Lachem, you have too much. I guess you have too much power. Why? Everybody's holy, and why are you raising yourself above this congregation? And Moshe, characteristically, right, he hears this, he falls on his face, which is a sign of great humility, or it could be also a sign of like, I give up, I can't take this anymore, more complaint, oh my God, right? How can I bear, these like difficult people? Okay, so we're going to go down a little bit, and if we have time a little bit later, we're going to look at commentary, because there's lots of commentary here. Richard, you have a quick comment? Richard Husid.
The first 4 verses here that you've read reemphasize the point that Beth made, that everything at the end of the last portion was in the plural. The community here is breaking apart, as it were. And defying the language of the tzitzit portion in the Shema, where everyone is supposed to look at and comprehend the meaning of the tzitzit. So this re-emphasizes the importance of a community and a congregation, which is now breaking apart. It's understandable given what happened in the spies thing, where the the community was told, sorry, you're never going to get there, and you got to wander around for all that time while you die. That is, the disappointment in the community is enormous. But Korach suggests that community now is in a schism, regardless of what the cause is.
Yeah, and yeah, I think what you're highlighting is also something else which you didn't say directly. This is a moment of grief. We're not going to get to the promised land. We're going to die in the wilderness. You know, we didn't buy into the project, and now we don't get to be part of the project.
Right.
Tragic. Okay. All right. So I want us to look at one more piece of text, and I'm going to open things up for a little debate. We'll see how that goes. Okay. So I'll read the English again. Anyone else want to read the Hebrew? Raise your hand, please, as I read the English, and we'll call on somebody. Okay, so then he spoke to Korach and all his company, saying, so this is Moshe, come morning, the Lord will make known who is God's and who is holy, and will grant him access to God's self. God will grant access to the one God has chosen. So now, you know, Moshe, through his sort of language, his careful language here, is sort of reinterpreting what power is. Power is bestowed by God, right? God will grant access to the one God has chosen. God does the choosing. This is not about me, Korach. So do this. You, Korach, and all your band take fire pans. So these are fire pans by which to offer incense. And tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before the Lord. Then the man whom the Lord chooses, again, Lord, not me, he shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. So in the Hebrew, Moshe recalls the language of Korach, Rav lachem b'nei Levi, and also the language about holiness. Moshe said further to Korach, hear me, sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that the God of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you access to God to perform the duties of the Lord's tabernacle and to minister to the community and serve them? Because after all, they're Levites. They have a job. They're not the high priest, right? They're not Kohanim, but they are Levites and they minister in the tabernacle. So why isn't that enough for them, right? And literally, is it too little for you, right? Is it too little for you? Now that God has advanced you and all your fellow Levites with you, do you seek the priesthood too, right? So it's not, being a Levite is not enough. You want to be Kohanim. Truly, it is against the Lord that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you shall rail against him? Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and if you can read till until 12. Whoever is raising their hand to read. And if no one, then I will bother Asher Chaim again, if you don't mind, Asher Chaim.
וידבר אל קורח ואל כל עדתו לאמור, בוקר ויודע אדוני את אשר לו, ואת הקדוש ויקריב אליו, ואת אשר יבחר בו יקריב אליו. זאת עשו, קחו לכם מחתות קורח וכל עדתו.
Stop right there, Asher Chaim, just for a second. So it's interesting. So we start the parsha with Vayikach Korach, and Korach takes, but Korach takes nothing. Here, Moshe is telling them what to take, which are the instruments of service, right, in the sanctuary, right? Kachu lachem, take. But this is what you shall take. What you should be taking is stuff in which to offer yourselves to God. Yeah.
If I may,
yeah.
Moshe is the one who recalls the tragedy of the two sons of Aaron and is instructing Korach to follow exactly that pattern of bringing secular, unauthorized fire.
But it is authorized since Moshe is instructing.
But it's not from God. It's a setup.
I see what you're saying. You're saying Moshe is making a mistake here.
No, Moshe is telling them, you want to improvise? You think you get to choose who gets to be Kohen? Pretend you're not of an Avihu. Put some fire in the incense and see if God loves it.
Got it. Okay.
Cynical?
Jay, and then let's go on.
Spoiler alert, but I agree with Asher Chaim, especially since, and this is one of the most mind-blowing things, Eliezer the third son, is the one who's got to clean up all the ashes of the 250 that are ultimately immolated, just like Nadav and Avihu were. So there's this incredible double echo that I think Asher Chaim is pointing to that is really in the text.
Yeah, that's interesting that another sort of tragic story whose grief is sort of overshadowing or at least echoing in this narrative. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, go on, Asher Chaim.
זאת עשו ככל לכם מחתות קורח וכל עדתו, ותנו בהם אש ושימו עליהם קטורת לפני אדוני מחר, והיה האיש אשר יבחר אדוני הוא הקדוש, רב לכם בני לוי. ויאמר משה אל קורח, שמעו נא בני לוי, המעט מכם כי הבדיל אלוהי ישראל אתכם מעדת ישראל להקריב אתכם אליו, לעבוד את עבודת משכן אדוני ולעמוד לפני העדה לשרתם, ויקרב אותך ואת כל אחיך בני לוי איתך, וביקשתם גם כהונה. לכן אתה וכל עדתך הנועדים על אדוני, ואהרון מהו כי תלינו עליו, וישלח משה לקרוא לדתן ולאבירם בני אליאב ויאמרו לא נעלה.
Okay, let's actually stop there. No, I'm sorry. Read the next verse.
המעט כי העליתנו מארץ זבת חלב ודבש להמיתנו במדבר, כי תסתרר עלינו גם הסתרר. אף לא אל ארץ זבת חלב ודבש הביא אותנו, ותיתן לנו נחלת שדה וכרם, העיני האנשים ההם תנקר, לא נעלה.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. So in English, is it not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness? They're calling Egypt a land flowing with milk and honey. So they're reversing the entire, the entire sort of vision of what the promised land is. Right, they're coming from the narrow place and they're calling that the land flowing with milk and honey. So even if you had brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey, which you didn't, and give us possession of fields and vineyards, which you didn't, should you gouge out those men's eyes? We will not come. Okay, so this is not the first time that the language of God's promise has been reversed by the people, right? If we could only go back to Egypt, right? That wonderful place. Okay, so now I'm going to stop my share and come back to the Zoom room. And now I'm going to invite people, not just to make comments or ask questions. I want to invite you to actually speak in the voice of Moshe or Korach and sort of articulate where each of them is, right? What's the argument? Right, so take a side, pick a side, either side, and speak for them briefly. Let's say, 2-3 sentences. Okay, Lauren and Jeremy, and then Roberta and Jay.
Okay, so I am Moshe and Korach and company. I would like to know, what is the triggering event? Why is it that all of a sudden you're coming to me with your complaint?
Great. So what's going on here? Right? I want to understand the backstory. I want to understand the context for in which you're making this complaint. Great. Thank you. Roberta.
I'm Korach. The milk and honey that I need are certainty, knowing my role in society, and obeying a God that I can see. You're not offering any of those to me.
But I told you, Korach, we're going into a land of milk and honey, flowing with milk and honey.
That milk and honey, I would never eat that milk and honey. And just, this is really informed by, I've studied quite a bit with Aviva Zornberg. What is exile? Like, what is it that, anyway, you just want us to stay and roll, but it's like, I'm like,
Yeah, if you can, that'd be great.
he wasn't in exile when he was a slave in Egypt because his consciousness he was united with that consciousness. Something like that.
Okay, other people who are willing to, yeah, Jay.
You just told us directly from God that if we have a blue thread on our talit and we look at it and we follow God's commandments, we are holy. And now you take that all away. That's exactly the abuse of power that we're talking about. You decide, in contrast to God's word, who can be holy and who cannot, who can have power.
How am I taking holiness away from you? You have your holiness, you have your talit, you have your blue thread.
No, you just said it. God will decide who's holy and who's not. And you can't, and therefore we'll have these signs. But that contradicts. If we follow the commandments, as we are reminded, we are holy. End of story.
Korach, are you following the commandments?
As far as I know, I am. But
Anyone?
that's not even the point. The point is, you are even taking that possibility away from us.
I believe you have the power to act within the mandates of God's aspiration for each of the Israelites to be holy or not. And I don't.
Absolutely. So, but what does holiness mean? Holiness is empty if some people are more holy than other people by virtue of their lineage, who they are. Then what's the point?
Maybe it's not about holiness, but about different roles. Okay, I'm
Or
going to.
about power, which is our problem here.
Alana, you want to step in? And then Sue Ann.
I'm Korach. Moshe, we left an abusive Pharaoh who controlled us in every manner of our lives. We do not want another Pharaoh. You want to turn us into soldiers. We do not want to invade other people's lands.
Wow. Whoa. I'm going to go to the next person. Laura and then Sue Ann. And if you've already spoken, I'm just going to call in people who haven't participated yet.
Shabbat Shalom. So I'm going to be Moshe. So here we go again. First, it was the spies challenging God and faith. And now you, Korach, fall on my face, Moshe. Here we go again. It's not enough for you. You've been given the job of service to be a Levi and serve in God's temple. And you're ungrateful. It's not enough for you. You want more. You want closer access to God. So I understand that. We all want to be closer to God, and we want to understand, and we want more signs. But I've given you so much. I've shown you so many miracles, and it's still not enough for you. And then he's kind of reprimanding. Moshe, I'm reprimanding you, Korach. Like, how dare you? You're a Levite. You have this wonderful role of service, and it's just not enough for you.
Moshe, all I want is more holiness. What's the problem with that? I just want to be closer to God. And basically, you're in the way. Okay, Sue Ann.
So I'm Moshe, and I would say, Korach, we are all holy. We all experienced God's presence with the cloud and the fire. You want to take, but what are you taking? We each have roles. So perhaps you're worried that we're thinking you'll think less of yourself, but perhaps you should think of yourself less.
Ooh, nice. Okay, Beth, Kathy Lynn.
Ani Moshe. Rav lechem yourselves, you jealous cousins. I was anointed by God. Why are you giving me this crap? That's Moshe when he's not being humble.
Okay, Kathy Lynn, Marilyn.
Okay, I'm Moshe. So let's see. Korach, sit with me. Tell me what's going on. Let me listen to you. It's been a rough journey for us.
Nice, Kathy Lynn. Wow. So you're able to go the gentle way as opposed to being annoyed with your cousin and sort of sick of everything. Beautiful.
Well, Moshe might go complain to God and get all his upset off, and then he can listen to Korach, and Korach can release some of the trauma that's driving him. That's my thinking.
Yeah, they need a trauma workshop in the wilderness. Marilyn.
Look, Moses, I could live with the fact that you're, okay, you're the big man. That's okay. But then on top of that, you take your brother, Aaron, and he and his line are the only ones that are allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. I think you've gone too far. I don't see why I can't go into the Holy of Holies too. I want to see God face to face at least once a year. Why can't I go in like your brother?
So it's not my fault. And in fact, it's my burden that God has saddled me with this role. And my brother, I mean, look at my poor brother. He lost 2 of his sons. Do you think we want this? Do you think we chose this? Did you hear about what I said at the burning bush? It's the last thing I wanted.
I want it. I want it. Why won't you let me have it?
Tell God you want it. I don't want it. I had to take it. I didn't have a choice. Like, really, what do you want from me? Okay, we're going to do a little more text. This is great. Thank you so much. We're going to do a little more text, and we have to end early, 9:50. So 5 more minutes of text and a couple of comments. Here we go. I'm going to try to screen share again. There's just this, there's one midrash that we absolutely have to do. Let's see if I can find it. No, it disappeared. Okay, can Michaela, can you screen share for me, please? That would be great. So we're about to look at a midrash just as I wait for the screen sharing, which ties together the tzitzit and what's going on with Korach and that conversation. So let's see, we're going to go down. Hold on a second. By Midbar Rabbah, exactly. Okay, let's see if we could just, perfect. Right there. Thank you so much. So let's see. So this midrash is connecting Vayikach Korach, and Korach took to the passage that we looked at from the last parsha about tzitzit. So Korach quickly said to Moses, in the case of a prayer shawl, so this is like a test of Moshe, which is all blue. So let's say there was a prayer shawl, which is all blue, which is all techelet, right? What is the rule about it being exempt from having the tassel? So we're instructed to have one of the tassels be blue, right? Or and Korach's argument is, well, if the whole talit is blue, do we really need a tassel to be blue? So Moshe said to him, such a prayer shawl is required to have the tassels. So there's no exemption there. Korach said to him, would not a prayer shawl, which is all blue, exempt itself when 4 blue threads exempt it? Okay, and then he makes another argument, which says that if a house was full of, Torah, books of Torah, would you need a mezuzah? And Moshe said, because a mezuzah contains within it pieces of the Torah, right? Passages from the Torah. And Moshe says, yes, we would still need the mezuzah. So it's interesting what arguments, we can stop screen sharing now, what arguments Korach is making, right? Korach is trying to use logic to find a way past certain mitzvot, right? If we do this, we don't have to keep this mitzvah. If we do this, we don't have to keep this mitzvah. So he's trying to find a way out of the forms, right, of the halacha, right? Sort of, using logic and what he presumes to be the rationales for these mitzvot to say, we don't have to keep this if we do this. Right. So what does this say about Korach? What's the argument between Korach and Moshe about, given this midrash? Any thoughts about that? Lori Wolko, great to see you. And then
hi, Shabbos. I guess I'm hearing it very differently. To me, it's reminding me of, the simple son, or not the wicked son, but the questioning son at the Passover Seder. It just seemed, I'm just getting like this, just the childlike attention, like that. That's all that I'm hearing in his words. It's not feeling like an halachic, trying to bring out different halachic. It just feels emotional to me. It feels very emotional, and that he's not getting enough attention, and that nothing's really, nothing that Moshe says is going to.
So Lori, it's kind of like, what about me? Like, what about me? Kind of, please.
Well, right. Exactly. It's not about the halachot. Yeah.
Okay. And now I'm not sure I'm saying your name right, but Ms. Matz. And please tell me how to say your name.
You actually did really well. I don't know if you can hear me. It's Mish. It's stuck.
Mish.
So it Mish,
Nice.
right? It's stuck. So it's hard to understand in English or pronounce. But I think that Korach is stuck. He's kind of rendered the heart from the mind. And I think when that happens, as the text is showing us, we become very focused on the self. And it doesn't mean, and walking through a narrow space as just the self is really tricky. And so in the beginning, the portion talked about, as the reader told us, that it became plural. And so I think that Korach hasn't moved to the plural, that we're in service as a whole. And I think what Moshe is trying to explain, in particular, that passage, I think did it really well, was that if Korach is thinking, his role is just as important as having a mezuzah or his role is just as important as the tassels on the talit. And he isn't realizing that he's a part of a whole, and that the roles that they have been given are inherently holy, and that it actually is, I think Moshe is trying to say, yes, this is a burden to me, but it's actually very, you're close to God when you understand that we all are important in the placement. All the mitzvot are important. All of our roles are important. And I don't know that he's explaining it in a way that Korach can see, because Korach is still stuck in the me. And Moshe is trying to say it is the whole. It's all the parts and being of service that are important.
Mish, that's so beautiful. And I love that you went back to Beth's comments at the beginning. So I want to say a couple of things about that, because unfortunately we have to leave. We have to end in a couple of minutes. So, I think Beth's comment about mob mentality made everything a little bit more subtle, because it's important to be part of the sacred collective enterprise, which I think doesn't erase one's individuality. But when one is part of the mob mentality, like the spies were, right, then you kind of, erase any sense of responsibility you have in the crowd. So how do we sort of rise up to the sacred enterprise of the collective without losing ourselves? And the other thing that's really important here is that Korach didn't, Moshe tells him, you have a role, right? You have you're a Levite, you do serve. And you know, when can we sort of sit in our lives with, you know, just being part of, because having any role means that you don't have that person's role, right? Or you don't have all the power, almost no matter what your role, or maybe no matter what your role is. You know, Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of the father says, Ezohu Ashir, who is wealthy, and answers by saying, Hasamech b'chalko. So that one who is happy or satisfied with their lot, but specifically, and I learned this from my good friend Chavruta, Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld, chalko means happy with, you know, you're part of things, you're chelek of things. So each of us is partial because we belong to a greater whole, whether we like it or not. And sometimes we like it, and sometimes we don't like it. And sometimes we don't like it, like, you know, intensely, because communities can drive us crazy. And being part of a society whose values we don't specifically like can drive us, you know, can feel like torture. So how do we, you know, what are we part of? What enterprise are we part of? And how do we articulate that mission, right? That mission and that message of the collective. So there are more hands. And I'm just going to take Joe, and I think we only have 2 minutes. So Joe, if you could just take 1 minute, that would be great.
Okay, just wanted to point out that I think Cora just had severe selective amnesia. When we're all caught up in ourselves, we forget things that we've said in the past, like what was said in Exodus chapter 19, when God brought the people to Sinai to speak to them, and they said, no, we don't want to speak to him, you speak to him. So I think Moses should have told him, look, you guys abdicated your opportunity to have this, you know, one-on-one, face-to-face. He gave you a job anyway, and you're still ungrateful. So don't have selective amnesia.
That's really interesting. So we have limited capacity, and we say no, as did the Israelites right after they heard the 10 Commandments. They said, no, we don't want to hear God's voice directly. And perhaps translating that, it's like, we don't want that much holiness. Moshe, you can have that much holiness because we can't tolerate it. And now they want what they rejected back then. That's really interesting, Joe. Okay, it's 1 minute too. You know, it's interesting because there are some commentators that say that Korach actually wanted more access to holiness, but at a moment that was premature, right? It's sort of like he wanted a messianic holiness, and he was trying to force it at this moment of Israelite history when the Israelites weren't yet ready. So there's a holy kernel in what he wanted, but the timing was off. It's like eating an unripe fruit that tastes bitter. So may we all find the right channels, right? The right forms and channels and community to remind us that each one of us is holy, and that we can lose our way when we separate ourselves from the community. Have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.